As a rule, the most brutal crimes are considered to be reprisals against children, which can serve as a reason not just for murder, but for literally dismembering a 2- and 3-year-old child and their mother into 7 parts. St. Petersburg, a very beautiful and romantic city with a population of 5.5 million people. However, it was here in April 2014 that one of the most terrible crimes in history occurred. A random passerby in the Krasnogvardaysky district of St. Petersburg noticed 5 bloody boxes and 14 bags. The law enforcement officers who arrived at the scene made an unthinkable discovery. The boxes and bags contained the dismembered remains of 2- and 3-year-old children, as well as their mother, who were literally cut to pieces. The amazing cruelty struck not just the city, but literally everyone who heard about this case. Who, and most importantly, why dealt so cruelly with small children? However, the most terrible discovery was established by investigators later. At the time of the separation of the limbs, the youngest boy was still alive. April 27, 2014, was quite sunny in St. Petersburg, and the Kirilov family was preparing to spend this Sunday at home. But then, no one suspected that this day would become the most terrible in their lives. Alexander was an ordinary man, smiling, according to neighbors and friends. Irina was educated and intelligent. The couple met in 2008, and in 2009 they already had a wedding. When Alexander and Irina got married, both were a little over 20. The groom's mother gave the newlyweds an apartment, and she herself moved in so that the children could live with their own family. The Kirilovs' neighbors, who had known Alexander since childhood, were happy. What a beautiful couple. In addition, they do not drink, do not do repairs at night, do not bring noisy companies home. The neighbor says, "Not a drunkard. Nothing that he found on her to kill like that. I don't understand." A year after the wedding, the Kirilovs had a son, Vanya, and then the younger Lyosha. It seemed that the young parents doted on their children, went for walks with the whole family, bought toys for their sons, took them to the circus and amusement parks. The kids grew up strong and inquisitive. The eldest, Vanya, studied English, and Lyosha did modeling and drawing in a children's art studio. Alexander Kirilov regularly uploaded photos of his beloved family to his page on the social network. Here are shots from the wedding, and here are pictures from a fun matinee in kindergarten. It would seem that they were a model family. True, soon after the birth of their second child, the spouses began to quarrel. Alexander received a higher education in construction, but he did not want to work. And not only in his specialty, but in general. Before the birth of her children, Irina worked as a veterinarian in a clinic, but it was too early to think about returning to work. Lyosha was only 2 years old. The family's only income came from breeding chihuahuas. The Kirilovs kept 3 dogs at home, and they periodically sold their puppies. The money was barely enough for a family of 4. I was once passing by their apartment and heard Ira shouting, "You're a grown man. When are you going to start working and feeding the kids?" recalls the Kirilovs' neighbor. And Sashka muttered something angrily in response. I only made out the phrase that no one understood him. Apparently, at that moment, the family boat cracked. You look at the photos on social networks and realize that it seems the parents doted on their children. There are a lot of photos, too many. But one thing haunts you: the photos only show the children. There are very few joint shots. Both Irina and Alexander only have photos from their wedding, as if their sons were the only joy of their life together. The couple often argued. Ira was unhappy that Sasha sat at home for months and didn't even try to work. He reproached her for being callous to his sensitive soul. This time, the family squabbles ended in hell. In April 2014, Alexander celebrated his 30th birthday. The birthday of his eldest son, Vanechka, was approaching. On May 6th, the boy was supposed to turn 4 years old. On April 27th, the Kirillovs began to decide how to celebrate the special date, but they could not come to an agreement on this issue. Irina and Alexander argued all day. In the evening, they put the children to bed and continued to argue. An ordinary quarrel escalated into a whole scandal with mutual reproaches and old grievances. When the situation heated up to the limit, Alexander grabbed a knife and stabbed his wife with it, and then again and again. Later, 11 wounds were found on the young woman's body. Frightened by the noisy parental quarrel, the eldest son, Vanya, burst into loud tears. The father silenced the child forever. He stabbed the baby 3 times in the heart, and then dealt with the younger Lyosha. The criminal strangled him. Without thinking twice, Alexander took the body to the bathtub and began to separate the limbs. As it was established, the heart of the youngest son was still beating at the time of separation. Alexander put the remains in bags and boxes from roller skates, which he himself gave to his sons on one of the holidays. The monster took the bag with the bodies to an abandoned vacant lot a few minutes' walk from the house, and then calmly returned back and lived as if nothing had happened. The horrible discovery was made the next day by a local resident while walking his dog. The dog started rummaging through a pile of garbage and pulled out a bag with his teeth, in which human remains were visible. Shocked by such a discovery, the dog's owner immediately called the police. Law enforcement officers and experts from the investigative department immediately arrived at the scene. Dozens of operatives began to go around the neighboring houses. The head of the Regional Ministry of Internal Affairs personally took control of the investigation of the criminal case. The police watched dozens of hours of video recordings from all existing street cameras in the area. And in one of the videos, they noticed an unknown man in a long black coat. He was carrying several bags out of the front door. Until midnight, and then in the morning, detectives were looking for the butcher's trail. District police officers and local administration employees joined in. On April 30th, the inspection of kindergartens bore fruit. One of the teachers identified one of the dead boys. The head of one of the kindergartens, having seen the pictures, grabbed her head. In the photo, she recognized Vanya Kirillov, a boy from the younger group. However, the head and arms of the second child were missing. Medics counted about 14 stab wounds on the bodies of the deceased. The woman suffered the most stabs, 11 of them. The executioner disfigured her so that the police would have problems with identification. On April 30th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, detectives from the Criminal Investigation Department came to the apartment of Alexander Kirillov on Bolshaya Porokovskaya. When asked who was there, they answered that they were drunk neighbors. Unceremoniously entering the hallway of the 2-room apartment, the operatives immediately noticed what they were looking for. A stylish black raincoat was hanging on a coat rack. By this time, the employees had already reviewed gigabytes of video recordings seized from various sources in several micro-districts. On April 29th, not far from Bolshaya Porokovskaya, in the Krasnogvardeyski district, 2 bags with body parts of a woman and 2 young boys were found. In one of the videos, a young man in a black raincoat was seen puffing under the weight of 2 bags. Kirillov, realizing who was in front of him, demonstratively moved to the kitchen, showing indifference and partly contempt. "Where are we going?" Zrenia, one of the homicide detectives, asked, taking him by the elbow. Kirillov went on the attack. He began to be rude and loudly call the neighbors for help. They surrounded him and waited until he ran out of steam. He yelled a little more about a lawyer and the inviolability of the home, then got tired. "Where are the children?" asked the policeman. We had a fight. Ira went with them, where she did not say, "The mobile phone is not answering," Kirillov said by heart. "Are you going to tell me everything right away? Or help?" asked the officer. Kirillov withdrew, obviously offended. He is so narcissistic that even in such an extreme situation, it splashes out of him. "His self-esteem is inflated beyond belief," said one of the operatives of the Criminal Investigation Department who spoke with him. Soon the investigative committee and experts began working in the apartment. An hour later, they found carefully washed traces of blood on the furniture and walls. Then the police unscrewed the pipes in the bathroom and added particles of biological mass to the protocols. Then they opened the parquet. There was an excessive amount of scorched blood. Kirillov was in the apartment all this time, but already in handcuffs. He stood his ground. "I don't know." While we were talking to him, he said that he has a higher education in construction, knows how to supervise complex processes, but is currently unemployed, since he is not ready, like a migrant worker, to lay bricks. Now, breeding rare dogs and fish is another matter. The fish, however, as well as the 2 chihuahuas, were indeed there. He behaved very impudently and even defiantly, one of the employees said. He shouted that we were violating the law on private property, that he was innocent, that he would not say anything without a lawyer, and even demanded that he be paid compensation for moral damages. He seemed completely confident in his rightness. When it became clear that Kirillov would be taken to a cell no matter what his version, he was offered to watch a silent feature film in which he, in the main role, walks from the front door to the railroad tracks, about 800 meters, and all with bags. At the same time, they made public the testimony of neighbors who, it turns out, saw these same bags on the stairwell late in the evening of April 27th. It's simple. He was cleaning up and threw the extra ones out of the apartment. Then Kirillov confessed, but calmly, with a sense of dignity. It was his wife who killed everyone. Then Alexander told his story. On Sunday evening, April 27th, he and his wife Ira had another argument over their different views on the birthday of their eldest son, 3-year-old Ivan. They were planning to celebrate it on May 6th. And when he was holding his youngest 2-year-old son, Alexei, to his chest, his wife grabbed a knife from the kitchen table and plunged it into the child. True, Kirillov was objective. According to him, his wife did not want to kill her son. She missed. She was aiming at her husband. For a while, those present were fascinated by the continuation of this terrible tale. Then Kirillov explained how he also grabbed a knife. A fight began, as a result of which the second child was killed, then the wife. And only then did his confusion end, and it dawned on him that he would now be blamed for everything. Here Kirillov began to curse. For some reason, he needed to remind her of the details. He told how he had butchered the 32-year-old mother of his children, then separated the limbs of the babies, how he had disfigured Irina's face so that law enforcement officers could not establish her identity. "Where is the child's head and hands?" the policeman asked him aggressively. "Let me remind you of the horror. When all the body parts were laid out on the evening of April 29th, one child had no head or hands." Kirillov explained that it was not far from the place where he had left 2 bags at 5 a.m. on April 28th. This crime in itself is punishable by life imprisonment. But Kirillov did not go to the police, did not bury the bodies in the forest under cover of night. He separated the body parts in the bathroom, worked quickly, and finished in a few hours. On the night of April 28th, Kirillov packed the remains into bags and boxes and carried them to the nearest garages. He needed 3 knives, 5 boxes, and 14 bags for this. Scattering the remains of his wife and children, Alexander hoped that no one would ever find them. When Alexander was arrested, he pretended to be insane, which hindered the investigation for a long time. The investigation lasted 2 years. Finally, having collected all the materials on the case, law enforcement officers handed it over to court. At the hearing in the Oktyabrski District Court, Alexander Kirillov was brought in a police car. When leaving the car, he addressed the reporters with an emotional speech, which he began with the words, "I did not kill. It was a fight. This is my wife. She had 2 knives. I had 1, but she did it by accident," Kirillov shouted towards the journalists. On November 25, 2016, one of the most terrible murderers in modern Russia, 32-year-old Alexander Kirillov, was sentenced to life imprisonment in St. Petersburg. He was found guilty of killing and severing body parts of his wife and 2 sons. The boys were only 2 and 3 years old. Kirillov arrived at the final court hearing in sweatpants and a strange sweater with glitter. Previously, he had an intricate haircut, sometimes shoulder length, sometimes with a strange forelock on the back of his head. In a pretrial detention center, the choice of hairstyles is limited. Kirillov chose a bald head. The entire trial in this high-profile case was held in a closed session, since the victims were minors. Because of this, the parties do not have the right to disclose the details of the case. Kirillov's motives are discussed only in dry legal terms. Personal hostility. Perhaps the general public should not know more. I don't want to think that there could be any rational, albeit shocking, explanation for this tragedy. Kirillov, both during the investigation and in court, diligently played it cool, but the psychological and psychiatric examinations that were conducted twice established his sanity. When the judge asked if he understood the verdict, Kirillov remained silent. Silence was also the defendant's last word. However, there were those in his entourage who were sure that Kirillov was innocent. "Sasha and I were walking our dogs together," says a resident of a neighboring house. "I know him as a completely sober and decent person. He once helped me carry my bags to the apartment. He constantly talked about his family, his wife, his children. He loved them very much." Kirillov's lawyer is confident in Alexander's innocence and intends to seek his release. In his opinion, traces of blood in the apartment and the discovery of the same raincoat as in the video recording are not enough for such a harsh sentence. "My client is not involved in this crime," the lawyer told the journalist. The state prosecutor agreed with the lawyer that there is no direct evidence against Kirillov in the case, but his guilt has been fully proven and is beyond doubt. Meanwhile, the convicted man himself does not admit guilt and is going to appeal the court's decision. The investigation believes that Alexander has no chance of being released. For the life of his wife and children, he will have to spend the rest of his life behind bars. It seems incredible, but Kirillov has not confessed to anything.